am so excited to introduce my next guest. I have Tim Dietz from the National SSA. He is the president and CEO, and he is here with us today to give us a National SSA update. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Jess. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I didn't bring as much booze as Keith, but great. I'm in the office. So.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's a local pub nearby, I'm sure.
Not sure my board would want me to, but there is. So.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. If you could give the audience a brief background of who you are and what you do out there for us as an industry, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Well, as Jessica said, my name is Tim Dietz. Great to be with SBOA. I've been friends with all the members at SBOA for a long time. I've been with the SSA now for 17 years, and so know an awful lot of you. And if you don't know me, then you should. But the Self-Storage Association does what associations do. We're here for the collective good, and I'll talk about that for a little while. But in a little while, but really, what the SSA does is host the industry at national events twice a year, or 3 times if you include our ski event, which is very popular. And we represent and protect the sector through legislation. So I've been here, as I said, 17 years. My first 11 were running the lobbying and government relations for the SSA, a little bit of communications in there, and have been the CEO here at the SSA now for about 6 years. So we have a team of 18 people who work in the best interest of the sector.
I would agree with that. And Tim, and we have owners and operators that are new into this space that come talk to us as an organization. One of the first things that we say to them is join the National SSA, join your state level SSA, because they are really here to help educate you, be a good resource, and be a good steward of, the industry, and obviously all of the stuff that you do on the legislative front. We're most appreciative for all of those efforts, and you guys do put on top-notch events. I was able to go to both this year, which I was super excited to attend both. They were well done, A++++ to your team. So just wanted to let you know that, and I'll let you dive into your presentation that you have for us today.
Great. And I did see you at those shows, and you look like you were having fun, Jessica.
I was.
We appreciate all the participation. So, so as I said, I try to simplify things, and Jessica asked me just to talk about what the SSA does for the industry. And I like to start with this, which if you've been to any of our state or national conferences, I show this quite often. But if we're doing these 3 elements well, then I feel like we're doing a good job for the industry and for our board of directors. So I'll start at the upper right, which is information and data. So I think information from the National Association is critical. We've been around now for 46 years, and there's a lot more information from other sources than had been at the SSA, had been in the industry previously. But what we try to do is to provide information that is uniquely collective in nature. That means that it's neutral competitively, but actionable and of value. And that includes data such as our demand study, which tells you who is storing where, how they're storing, how they're paying for it, what they're storing, information such as that. And we do recognize that there are organizations such as the larger companies and REITs that have more information than us. But again, we try to do those things that are uniquely neutral in nature. So then the conferences and education, I think that speaks for itself. For 46 years, I think mostly what we were about was conferences and education. And we do 2 national conferences a year. Except for 2020, of course, where we had to go online, much like this. But we do our fall conference in Las Vegas, which has recently moved to the MGM Grand Conference Center. And then the spring conference is somewhere east of the Mississippi each year, or maybe Texas. So we try to cater to our members who are on the East Coast. And then finally, advocacy, which we really began about 12 or 13 years ago. And this is a critical principle part of what any association should be doing, and that is representing and protecting the sector in the public arena. So that basically that would be lobbying. So our industry was under the radar for a long time, and mostly what I'll talk about today is how we're working to support the sector in this regard, because bad things can happen if the industry isn't protecting itself. So advocacy is, and of course, that was my role for more than a decade here. We have a great team led by Joe Doherty, who's our Chief Legal and Legislative Officer, with help from Daniel Bryant, who's an associate attorney. But the three of us really work with a pool of representatives, lobbyists, and law firms throughout the country to help the sector. And I think everybody would be surprised at the threats we face as an industry. So how do we achieve our mission? When we talk about those three elements that are important to us, we have to function in a way that is strong for everyone. That starts with being financially healthy. And thanks to partners such as SBOA, which has contributed to the SSA and our legislative program for many years. So thank you for that. And our membership, we need members. So we can't support and represent the sector without our members joining the SSA. And that needs to be an inclusive membership. So we are here for the largest operators. Public Storage obviously is a very important member of the Self-Storage Association. But, with somewhere around 55,000 properties in the country and 30,000 owners, there's a lot of mom and pop operators out there and a lot of medium-sized operators, and we need them all. And everybody is welcome to find a home here at the SSA, and we need everybody. So those large companies, the large public companies, are probably somewhere around 20% of the sector right now. We have a strong board. We always work to have a strong board of directors at the SSA. That includes 2 members from the public companies and then 10 others that are elected, many of whom you know, and I won't get into the board, but again, the board needs to be representative of the sector, and we are a very eclectic industry. So we have members who only have 5 to 10, board members who only have 5 to 10 properties. And then, for example, we have Joe Schoen from U-Haul as a member of our board of directors. And finally, and I'd say almost most importantly, is our capable staff of 18 professionals in the sector, in the association world. And we work out of Alexandria, Virginia, Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're ever in town, we would encourage you to stop by and enjoy some time here with the SSA staff. And they do everything from the meetings, from our state association management, to the publications, and I touched on the lobbying and legislation. So already running out of time, so I just wanted to show you this. This kind of demonstrates the number of what I call, what this says is bills, but the legislative situations that we've dealt with in the last 13 or 14 years. And there's been a lot of sales taxes, insurance law, lien laws. What I want to point out here is the yellow bars. Those are threats that we face. That would mean threats that came to the industry that we hadn't experienced before. And you see so much more of that during 2020 and 2021 because we faced a lot of COVID-related threats. So where we used to be more proactive and maybe 70% of what we did and reactive in protecting us from threats and 30%, it completely flipped during COVID, as happened to a lot of landlords and real estate sectors in the last 18, 19 months. So our lobbying is critically important. In the blue states that you see here, which is just about all of them, we've had legislative activity here in the last 2 years. So what I want to demonstrate here is that these are defensive situations. This is a timeline of some of the threats that we faced. And that would include a lot of things in some of the states that are not so business friendly, like California, New York, and New Jersey. Things that we never expected. Of course, we never expected COVID, but there was a movement afoot with legislatures to really give a break to consumers, which we appreciate because we make our living from consumers. But also, these legislators don't have much sense for business quite often, and that puts the businesses at a disadvantage. So the SSA worked to oppose these elements. So the defensive situations were in this many states in 20 and 21, and again, probably about 70% defensive posture compared to 30% previously. But at the same time, we had situations where we were doing things like trying to remove the requirement to print in advertising the auction notices and so forth. And we got 7 of those done just in the last year. So now most states, 27 now, you don't have to print auction notices in newspapers, which we think is an antiquated and an unnecessary element of the lien process. Insurance laws, sales taxes that we've opposed. So if you put it all together, we've experienced the busiest legislation period that the industry has ever experienced in the last 18 months. And again, we brought legal and legislation in-house just in time to be ready to oppose. We do use lobbyists and lawyers from outside the industry and outside the association as well, but such as Carlos Caslow and Scott Zucker, who are friends and colleagues of ours. But it takes a village, as they say. So a couple of things. Los Angeles, they proposed a moratorium on liens during COVID. An example of how we neutralized that threat was we asked for a provision in the law that required tenants to demonstrate in writing that their distress was related to COVID. And lo and behold, there's not many of those showed up, and it became the model for the industry. So sometimes the best answer is meeting halfway, and the legislature was happy with our support in that regard. So another situation unique to California is what's called the price restrictions that had to do. Sorry, somebody's sending me a note here, and I got a little distracted. So in California, they've tried to impose rent control on our sector on ballot measures for many years, and it's always failed. But when there's an emergency declaration, they have what's called anti-price gouging laws. So that means that within the emergency declaration itself, you can't raise your rates during the emergency declaration more than 10%, and that's fine. Nobody wants to do something nefarious with respect to rents to our tenants. But you are private operators of real estate, and you have a right to set your price to what you want. The problem is that these price restrictions have stayed in place in some respects, or in some cases, 3 or 4 years. Most of them started with wildfires, and then we saw several counties impose the price restrictions through emergency declarations due to COVID, and recently we've also had floods. So, essentially that becomes, by edict of the administration in California, that becomes rent control. So something we utilize our lobbyists in Sacramento to oppose these measures. Prince George's County suggested a lien moratorium during COVID. The good news is we have a really good lobbyist in Maryland. If we didn't have that lobbyist ready to represent, who understood our sector and understood our talking points, there would have been a moratorium on evictions and non-payment for several months. And again, that becomes free rent over time. We were able to get ahead of it and oppose that situation. And it gives you a sense, when we're dealing with something in California or New York and New Jersey, gives you a sense for how broad our scope is. For those of you in California, the SSA has been very involved in what's called Proposition 13. It's a little confusing because in 1977, this law was instituted, which was good for real estate, called Proposition 13. It became Proposition 15 last year. And what Proposition 13 did was restricted tax assessors from increasing assessments of property taxes more than 2% a year once you own the property. So everyone's dealing with property tax hikes throughout the country. And the only thing good going for California with respect to business and real estate in particular is Proposition 13 and now Proposition 15. California is a very budget-thirsty state. So they are struggling to pay for pensions and union pensions and so forth. And so where are they looking for that money? It started with commercial properties, and self-storage, of course, was included in that. So the Self-Storage Association put together a committee to oppose the changes to Proposition 13, and really became a public service program to encourage investment and discourage the changes to this. We raised more than $4 million to be part of a larger group of $70 million of general commercial real estate to oppose it. So there were 16 million votes on this ballot measure, and the good guys won by less than 600,000 votes. If it were not for Proposition 13, then property taxes would increase exponentially. And the line item for property taxes is pretty large. Anybody else who deals in Texas or some of these other states where the assessments have gone through the roof. Again, California is not exactly a business-friendly venue. And Proposition 13 is one of the few things that it has going for it, encouraging investment in that state. This is kind of an interesting one. We have threats that come from all over the place. And this was in Arizona. And you think that most of the threats to the business community come from the left. This came from the right, from NRA advocates, actually. They wanted to insist that self-storage operators be required to allow ammunition and firearms to be stored on the property. Well, that should be your decision. It's really a property rights issue. So while some of you may be gun right advocates, and we appreciate that, your leases are up to you, okay? And if you want to, all leases work to avoid hazardous materials and dangerous items such as weapons and so forth. And you shouldn't be required to allow the storage of weapons on your property. Great state self-storage association in Arizona with terrific lobbyists in place were able to get ahead of that. So really it's a team effort. The SSA in many of these cases has to go it alone from the national offices. But when there's a state association that's got it together and has great lobbyists in place, then it makes all the difference in the world. We call those pitchforks in the streets. So I just thought I would throw what happened in Michigan. That was the last lien moratorium associated to the pandemic to pop up, and that was in May of this year. And again, they wanted to prevent the eviction of non-paying tenants basically into perpetuity. And how do you manage collections if you can't enforce your lien? So again, a great state self-storage association in Michigan. I know SBOA is part of that. We were able together to get ahead of the situation and avoid that moratorium on evictions. So really unique to what we experienced here with COVID. So just a sampling of some of the challenges that we face as a sector. There's a lot of money in self-storage, and that attracts a lot of attention. So you need an association and advocates to put up a headwind against these threats. And that's why we encourage you to join not only the National Self-Storage Association, but also the state self-storage associations as well. So Florida, we've been working on eliminating the newspaper ads. That's the last thing I'll touch on. But we're opposed by the publishers. And again, we think it's absurd that one private sector, such as self-storage, should be required to support another private sector, such as newspapers. I mean, we appreciate newspapers, but it's another private sector, and nobody reads these advertisements, which is why we've been opposing this antiquated provision now for quite some time. And again, up to 27 states that you are not required to publish anymore. And we lost that one in Florida because the publishers are very powerful in Tallahassee, which they are in the big states. But we'll be going after it again next year. So these are our events. If anybody's interested in, a lot of you end up at Self-Storage Association events. And, for example, the next national event that we have will be our ski event. It was supposed to be in Canada. We've tried Canada, of course, during COVID for 2 years. And Canada is not particularly receptive to Americans right now and make it very difficult. So we had to cancel the Whistler event, and we will be going back to one of our favorite ski venues, which is Big Sky, Montana, the second week in January. So hope to see some of you there. So, and then our spring and Vegas conferences look to be on schedule. So we're glad to be back in person.
Yeah, we're glad to be back in person with you, Tim. And I can't wait for the spring conference. It's right here in Orlando. I live in Florida in Jacksonville, so it's a 2-hour drive for me versus having to go out to Vegas, which is a blessing, but I do like going out to Vegas. So,
oh, yeah. Air travel is such a pain right now anyways, so good for you. You can drive.
I can drive, and I can't wait to drive that one. So I have a couple questions while we wrap up here for you, Tim. Related to COVID and legislation, do you see that that's going to continue to affect the industry? Do we have more threats coming because of the pandemic, or do you think it's going to kind of level itself out?
Well, so self-storage, we thought the dam was opening on these moratoriums on evictions because, of course, the residential side were struggling so hard because, you know, all the consideration was on the side of the tenants, which we realized there was problems with income for a lot of consumers. But where's the consideration for the landlord, right? And landlords have their own, they have their own reality, their own financial realities. They have investors, they have relationships with banks and loans. So we experienced probably 25 or 30, and that last one that happened was in Michigan. And so we're encouraged that we haven't had one in about 5 or 6 months, but never say never. So nothing yet, but having experienced 25 or 30 of these, you know, who knows what could happen. It's still a strange, uncharted territory for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tim, and giving us that great national SSA update. We truly appreciate you carving some time out of your schedule today for the SBOA event.